I want to hear a definitive answer.
He's not going to go there. You're not going there yet. You're not going there yet.
The Portland Trailblazers are getting to the finals.
Your thoughts?
What?
Okay, they're having some real fun right now.
They have been there. Might be a little.
The NBA playoffs are right around the corner, and I'm super excited for them to get underway. In this video today, I'll be making my 2020 playoff predictions for the first round. All 8 matchups are thrilling and intriguing in their own way. Today I hope to give accurate predictions of what is going to happen in the first round of the 2020 playoffs. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get started. The first playoff matchup I'll be looking at is the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Portland Trailblazers. Let's go over some of the key factors that may influence the outcome of this series. The first key factor is Caruso minutes. With the loss of Avery Bradley, Alex Caruso is the Lakers' best on-ball defender, and he's going to be crucial for helping to contain Dame. From previous games this season, Alex Caruso, when guarding Dame, was able to hold his own and in fact create more problems for Damian Lillard than any other Laker defender. The next key factor is the rebounding battle between the two teams. Portland has been struggling with rebounding in the bubble so far. In their last game against the Grizzlies, they got significantly out-rebounded by a team that features only one guy who averages over 5 rebounds a game in Jonas Valanciunas. This poses a problem as the Lakers are able to roll out LeBron, Anthony Davis, and JaVale McGee, each of which average significant rebounding numbers. The last key factor that makes the biggest difference in this series are the closing lineups for both teams. Throughout the bubble so far, the Blazers have been putting out this starting 5 to close games. The Lakers, on the other hand, have been putting out this 5 at the end of games. This presents a plethora of problems for the Blazers' defense, which is already one of the worst in the league. But it is clear that there is a giant mismatch against them when it comes to defending LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Both Gary Trent Jr. and Carmelo Anthony are unable to guard LeBron due to the fact that Trent is too short and Carmelo is not laterally quick enough. Along with that, Nurkic is the only body the Blazers can throw at Anthony Davis at the end of games. And as we saw in 2018, it just wasn't enough. Therefore, my prediction for this series is the Lakers win 4-0. The next series we'll be looking at is the Clippers versus the Mavericks. Let's take a look at some of the key factors that play into this series. The first key factor is the Clippers missing pieces. The Clippers have been without major pieces such as Montrezl Harrell, who just recently tweeted on August 10th that he'll be making his return just in time for the playoffs. He hasn't played a single game in the bubble, and along with that, Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George have all been sitting out multiple games, resting nagging injuries and recovering from injuries suffered in the bubble. My main concern if I were a Clipper fan would be a potential first-round injury to either Patrick Beverley or Montrezl Harrell, due to the fact that their games rely so much on energy, effort, and hustle, and soft tissue injuries after months and months of not playing competitive basketball are very common. Look for Doc Rivers to play them limited minutes in this series in order to lower the potential of a season-changing injury. The next key factor in this series is the inexperience that the Mavs currently face. Their 2 best players, Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis, heading into this year's playoffs, have never once played a single playoff game. This could present problems for them since the defensive coverages they will be facing in the playoffs will be vastly different than those seen in the regular season. Now, Luka Doncic has proven to be a certified closer in the league, but he has not been able to prove this in the playoffs just yet, and thus some playoff experience may be needed before the Mavericks are considered title contenders. The last key factor is the crunch time woes of the Dallas Mavericks. Heading into the postseason, the Mavericks are one of the worst crunch time teams in the league. Crunch time, or the clutch, is defined by the last 5 minutes of a game when the score is within 5 points. As you can see here, the Mavs are ranked around other, juggernauts such as the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Chicago Bulls. But in all seriousness, this will present them big problems in the playoffs due to the fact that the Clippers have a great closing lineup, which they go to, which is this lineup right here. The last time the Mavs and Clippers played, the Mavs trotted out this lineup at the end of the game. As we can see, these lineups look pretty similar in terms of player builds. However, the Clippers are more superior on the defensive end. One key for the Mavericks in this series is Kristaps Porzingis' willingness to work in the paint instead of behind the three-point line. However, all things considered, my prediction is that the Clippers will win 4-1. The next series we will be looking at is the Denver Nuggets versus the Utah Jazz. Let's take a look at some key factors in this series. The first key factor is the Jazz secondary scorer. Besides Donovan Mitchell, the Jazz do not have a reliable and consistent secondary scorer. Throughout most of the season, they had Bojan Bogdanovic, but in the quarantine period, he underwent surgery on his wrist and thus he is out for the season. Next up in the pecking order should be Mike Conley. He has been balling out so far in the bubble, averaging over 20 points a game. However, the Jazz are without him as well, due to the birth of his child. This leaves not much left for the Jazz. Next in line for scoring responsibilities for them would probably have to be Jordan Clarkson. And if you're in a series where Jordan Clarkson is your second best scorer, you have problems. The next key factor is the Nuggets' depth. The Nuggets have one of the deepest benches in the entire league, featuring guys such as Jeremy Grant, Monte Morris, Bol Bol, Will Barton, just to name a few. This is important because this is huge come playoff time if and when the starters are unable to break away in the opening 8 to 10 minutes. The Nuggets bench is able to eliminate any leads the opponents may have created in the starting minutes, along with expanding on leads their starters may have already created. This is the polar opposite of what the Jazz have currently, because the Jazz will most likely be running a 6 or 7 man rotation, whereas the Nuggets have the ability to run anywhere between 7 to 11 guys for a single game. This favors the Nuggets immensely. These two factors in itself are enough for me to predict the Nuggets to win in 5 due to the sheer mismatch in roster construction. This should be one of the more one-sided matchups in the first round. The last series we have in the Western Conference is the Houston Rockets versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's take a look at some key factors. The first one is the health of the stars. Recently, the Rockets came out with a report saying that Russell Westbrook would be unavailable for the first 2 games or so of the series. This is huge considering that the Rockets' second best player is out for at least 2 games. This means that there would be an added burden on James Harden to will the Rockets to a win in at least the first 2 games. It could even be more. We don't have all the information yet. Along with that, when Russell Westbrook does come back, it is unsure of whether he'll be the same player or if he'll be diminished in any way due to his injury that he's facing currently. The reason that I made stars plural in the key factors is due to the health concerns of Chris Paul. Chris Paul has a history of getting injured in the playoffs and just being injury prone in general. The only way the Thunder are able to compete in this series is if Chris Paul is healthy throughout the whole series as well. Without Chris Paul, the Thunder wouldn't even be a playoff team. That's why his health is so vital for the team. The next key factor for this series is the contrasting styles of play that these two teams play. Let's start off with the Thunder. The Thunder's main offense is relying on their guards' mid-range shooting ability. The skill of being able to keep your defender on you while in the mid-range is very important since it allows for open back cuts and flare actions on the weak side. The three guards of the Thunder in Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are all very, very skilled in the mid-range. However, the Houston Rockets' philosophy is completely different. They run essentially 5 guards in their lineup, and every possession down seems like they're shooting a 3. That is because they are manipulating the analytics, which say that shooting a 3 on every possession is better than a contested 2, which the Thunder tend to take. The third key factor in this series is the contribution of Steven Adams. Steven Adams will have a decided advantage over whoever the Rockets decide to throw at him, since the Rockets are not running any single true center. His impact on the boards will be a big determinant on whether the Thunder win this series or not. His impact defensively will also be big if he is able to protect the basket and close out to corner shooters. With the current Houston defensive philosophy as well, Adams should be able to put up 20-20 on every single game. All in all, my prediction for this series is that the Thunder win in 7 games. I think that the gambling approach of the Rockets will only win them a few games, and that the loss of Russell Westbrook for their first 2 games will have them climbing an uphill battle throughout the series. Along with that, I trust easy mid-range jumpers and layups over contested 3s in a Game 7. The first Eastern Conference series I will be starting with is the Miami Heat versus the Indiana Pacers. Let's get into some key factors in this series. The first key factor is the Pacers needing a secondary scorer in order to win. Throughout the bubble so far, TJ Warren has been one of the most prolific scorers in the league. He has dropped 30 plus multiple times and even topped the 50 mark as well. All of this coming from a 15 to 20 point per game scorer this year. At the end of the seeding games, TJ Warren began to come back down to earth, but his production is very valuable to this team, especially since they are without all-star Domantas Sabonis. In my opinion, the Pacers should run Warren as their number 1 scoring option, which would give him the utmost confidence to continue his hot streak. This would allow Victor Oladipo to be the secondary scorer, and thus he would face less pressure from opposing defenses. The next key factor in this series is the battle of the bigs. Specifically, I'm talking about Heat center Bam Adebayo versus Indiana Pacers center Miles Turner. Bam Adebayo has emerged this year as one of the most improved players in this league. His ability to cover the entire floor on defense and switch out to guard on the perimeter is something that is very valuable for this Heat team. However, Miles Turner is able to do something to limit Adebayo's efficiency on the defensive end. Turner likes to spend a lot of his time on the 3-point line. If Turner is able to consistently make his threes, he's able to draw out Bam from the rim, which clears up the paint for the Pacers guards. This is one of the biggest keys for the Pacers to win this series. The last key factor for this series is the clear battle between TJ Warren and Jimmy Butler. Before the hiatus, the last time these teams played, Jimmy Butler and TJ Warren got into a bit of a scuffle on the floor, and this beef has not died down yet. It is clear that these two do not like each other and will continue to try to outplay each other every time they play. However, in my opinion, the only way for the Pacers to be able to compete is if Warren is able to control his emotions and does not attack Jimmy Butler on a personal level throughout the series. Jimmy Butler is just too mentally tough and a master at trash talk that does not fare well for this Pacer team if he gets riled up. Ultimately, I think that Jimmy Butler gets the best of TJ Warren and that the Pacers' lack of scoring becomes prominent in this series. For those reasons, my prediction is that the Heat win 4-2. The next series we will be looking at is the Boston Celtics versus the Philadelphia 76ers. let's take a look at some key factors in this series. The first and most important key factor is Joel Embiid. The Sixers are without all-star Ben Simmons due to a knee injury for which he is out for the season. This changes the potential outcome for this series drastically because with Simmons there, the Sixers would have probably run through the Celtics. But without Simmons, Joel Embiid will have to do his best Shaq impersonation every game in order for the Sixers to have a fighting chance against the loaded Celtics team. Look for Embiid to have a monster game 1, potentially 30 plus points and 20 plus rebounds. And if they win, look out. The next key factor in this series is if Al Horford is able to make an appearance. Throughout this year so far, Al Horford has been abysmal. He's posting a stat line with career lows in all major statistical categories. For the Sixers to have any chance of winning this series, Al Horford needs to exert his presence on the lackluster Celtic bigs. If Al Horford is able to return to the Al Horford of old, the Sixers have a chance at winning. The last and third key factor is the mental toughness of the two teams. It is clear that the Celtics are the more mentally tough team rather than the Sixers, due to the chemistry problems the Sixers have been having all year. I won't be surprised if the Sixers have an exceptional game 1, lose, then pack it in for the rest of the series. For that reason, I have the Celtics winning 4-1 in this series. I can see the Sixers having a dominant game 1, winning, but the Celtics adjusting and then winning the next 4 in a row. Lastly, the next 2 Eastern Conference matchups are 2 of the biggest mismatches in recent history. For that reason, I'll just leave it at the fact that they both sweep. As always, I'm eager to see what you guys have to say. Leave your comments down below, and I'll be sure to read them. But for now, that's all, and I'll see you in the next one.